Should San Jose Sharks prospect Will Smith sign his ELC once the Boston college season is over? Or should he go back one more season at Boston College? We debate that on today's episode.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, contributor at San Jose Hockey Now. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Probably part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. If you want to be an everyday, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch this on YouTube as well. And today, our good friends Hadi and Sebastian join, where we debate what the Sharks should do. Should they sign Will Smith to his ELC, therefore ending his career at Boston College, making him a professional, and starting that process? Or should the Sharks send him back and have one more season at Boston College before kind of making their decision? And then plus, I give my thoughts on what I think the Sharks will do, or what I think they should do, or whatever. So before we get into that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. All right, and now we bring in the Locked On NHL Prospects hosts, Hadi and Sebastian, to help me decide, at least deliberate, what should the Sharks do with Will Smith. Hadi has decided to take the pro Will Smith. He should sign his ELC. Sebastian, noted Will Smith hater, thinks he should go back to college one more year. So boys, before we get into this, how are you guys doing today?
Doing very good.
Doing great. Yeah, going very well.
You guys are all David Reinbacher right now, so that's I got you guys in a good mood today. So all right. Hadi, make your opening arguments on why the San Jose Sharks should sign Will Smith to his ELC after his season is complete with Boston College.
Well, for me, it's really about what he's got left to learn. For me, with Will Smith, there's he's a pretty inside driven player. He's able to cut inside to make plays inside of pressure, which is it's a decent part of his game, but it's not a part of his game he's exploring as much by force. It's a type of area of his game where I'd like to see him make more decisions to go to the inside rather than being pushed to it. And I think that in the NHL, teams are more likely to box you to the outside than force you inside, which is one thing that, for me, I mean, if he signs with the Sharks, plays a full season in the AHL with the Barracuda, I think that's a great spot for him to be able to learn to decide to push to the inside rather than be forced there. He's really good in transition. He's got a really strong ability to catch pucks in motion and make plays quickly. He's got a wicked shot that was clear last year. It's still clear this year. And the playmaking ability is high end. So for me, I feel like the tools are certainly NHL ready, but the decisions aren't. And I don't know how far the NCAA game can take him decision-making wise. I think the earlier he makes a jump and plays pro hockey against bigger bodies, smarter defensemen, more positionally sound defensemen who consistently drive play to the outside, the better his projection could get moving forward. Like that's my take on it. But I certainly see the arguments for staying there, especially if Cutter Gauthier signs his ELC and leaves Boston College. There's a great spot for him moving forward, but I just don't know how much more he can learn at the NCAA level.
Sebastian, Sebastian. So you're taking again the he should stay one way. Your opening arguments on why Will Smith should go back to college for one more season.
I'll preface it by saying that I don't think there's a wrong decision to make here, which is a real luxury for the San Jose Sharks. But I think if I were in control of his development, sending him back for one more year would be a pretty wise decision, like especially if Cutter Gauthier signs with the Ducks this season. There is a bit of a silver lining for Sharks fans, even with Cutter Gauthier entering the league and again with a division rival, in that it would open up a spot for Will Smith to be the play driver on that Boston College team. And we've seen this season when he's been playing with Gabe Perreault and Ryan Leonard, he has been that primary play driver, play creator. He sets the pace when he's on the ice. And that's been great to see. But when he's been playing with Cutter Gauthier, he's kind of staying on the back foot a little bit more. Cutter Gauthier is really the one that's setting that pace of play. And I'd love to see what Will Smith can do with one more season in the NCAA. Also, in terms of what he can integrate in his defensive game. That is one thing that I think he still has a decent amount of work to do on. And while he does lead the nation in points in college hockey as of right now, and there possibly isn't all that much more growing room in his offensive game at the NCAA level, as Hadi mentioned, I do think that at the defensive game still has a decent amount of growth potentially moving forward, staying in college hockey. He is decent enough on the back check as a pickpocket. He can really get underneath opponents and quickly start counterattacks, and that's a defensive strength of his. But in terms of defending the cycle, he can be quite passive. He can try to get implicated with his physicality, but there's still a lot of learning and growing there to do to be up to par in terms of being an NCAA defender. So I think that especially if both Gabe Perreault and Ryan Leonard stay with Boston College for one more season, letting Will Smith be that 1C with his long-term partners in crime, I really think would help all of their developments and really set them all up for success once they do make that jump to professional hockey. And again, I don't think there's necessarily a wrong choice here, but San Jose has shown in recent seasons that they like taking the patient approach, like they did with William Eklund, for instance, when he was pretty much NHL ready out of the gate, but they sent him back for one more season in Sweden. And I think that taking that patient approach with Will Smith, especially because San Jose itself is just such a tire fire at the NHL level, keeping him in the best college program instead of the worst NHL team, I think could also benefit him in terms of keeping those like winning habits rather than losing habits in his game.
All right. So Hadi, you mentioned kind of how he needs to kind of develop his game. But I mean, we're talking about a player who's having one of the best freshman seasons in NCAA history. Like, this is something that you should continue to build on, right? And like, how much more room is he going to actually have to grow in his, like, if he goes back to school?
Yeah, so, for me, like Sebastian mentioned, I think the defensive game is something that he can definitely work on. And my question is more, is this something that he could benefit from learning at the AHL level or the NHL level? I think that overall the decisions of forwards heading in transition, when you're facing them defensively, are more or less the same, NCAA versus NHL or AHL wise. The approach of forwards off the rush is pretty much the same. So when you're back checking, you're experiencing pretty much the same scenarios in both levels. So I think there's definitely a way for him to be able to continue to grow his defensive game in the NCAA. But I also think that he's basically going to be facing the same types of defensive scenarios in the AHL or the at the NHL. So for me, it's just, he can learn these elements at both levels. And on the opposite side of that, the transition issues I mentioned, where he's kind of being forced to the inside rather than deciding to take the inside and timing it well, that he can't really grow as well in the NCAA level as he could in the AHL or the NHL. So it's just, for me, it's just, I see it as more of a checklist of here are the things he needs to develop. Where can he develop these things? And I see a lot more checks at the AHL or NHL level, even if it's going to be more difficult, especially with the luxury that the Sharks have of being so patient. With William Eklund, I think Eklund, Will Smith, I think there's still an ability there to be able to sign him early, give him his full. I mean, you can give him 2, maybe even 3 years of his ELC, splitting time between the AHL and NHL to kind of figure it out without necessarily putting any pressure on him to be that performer. It's not a market like Toronto or Montreal where every eye is on you and the pressure is huge. And then, if you can't if he gets signed and you're not making the NHL, people are calling you a bust, that type of thing. It's not that type of scenario. And we're seeing it with William Eklund this year. It's not always been perfect with Eklund, but, they're finding him some friends and making some, giving him great opportunities. So I think that for me with Will Smith, it's just, I see a lot more checks on the checklist of things he can work on that he can work on in the AHL versus the NCAA.
All right, before we finish with Sebastian and Hadi and get their thoughts on what the Sharks should do, just need to take a quick break. We're past the halfway point of the season. Sharks fans, I know it's been a brutal one, but I want to remind you that you can still win big by playing Daily Fantasy Hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is just pick some of your favorite players, whether they're NHL superstars like McDavid, Crosby, or McKinnon, or some of your favorite Sharks players like Zetterlund, Granlund, or Eklund, and record more or less in their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Sharks fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Sebastian, so you mentioned him, especially of Cutter Gauthier, and I think all three of us assume Cutter Gauthier, he's playing his last couple games here with Boston College before he ships off to the NHL. How much, yes, if he's playing on this top line, but again, I mean, watching this Boston College team, they just romp through teams. It doesn't matter who, they're just romping through teams. But how much time are you going to be able to spend on your defensive zone? And yes, maybe you can play, PK1. We've seen Will Smith starting to play a little bit of penalty kill, but again, this team is just such a juggernaut. Aren't they just going to continue to just romp through teams next season?
Probably. I mean, it's a ridiculously strong program, right? It doesn't really matter. I don't think Cutter Gauthier is really the one factor that's the separation between best in the country and fifth best in the country. I think they're the best team no matter what, top to bottom, whether we're talking about Jacob Fowler and Net, who both me and Hadi are big fans of as well. It's a very strong team. That said, I do think that having another season with also another benefit of staying in college is also, if you're a college hockey player, there's a lot of juggling that you have to do in terms of the academics, with the social life, with going to training every single day and playing on weekends. And I do think that giving Will Smith perhaps a bit more ice time, this season, there's been quite a few games where he's logging around 14, 15, 16 minutes a night, a lot of games as well that are in that 19-minute range. But if he's going back next season, he's going to be playing 21, 22 minutes every single night. From a conditioning aspect, I think that would be quite nice to have that again for another season, with that added ice time, with those added puck touches, which even at the AHL level, he wouldn't be getting anywhere near the puck touches he's getting right now. And that Boston College team, one of the benefits of being such a dominant team in the offensive zone is that from a stylistic standpoint, they operate at even strength a lot like an NHL power play does in many senses. Very quick puck touches, constantly moving around the perimeter, looking for seam passes towards the inside. And I think it really benefits Will Smith to be playing that pacey offensive, high motor type of style where he's constantly moving off puck, and his off puck routes are some of the strongest outside the NHL at this point. But I think another season where he's working on that conditioning, working on that work-life balance that you really have a ton in college, I really do think that would be another benefit. And I don't think that you can really be overly ripe if you're going back to the best program in college hockey for another season. And again, the Sharks have the luxury of time here. And on top of that, if you wait for one more season and sign him, I believe you still get him onto a 3-year ELC, which would also be quite a nice luxury to have, of being able to add Will Smith on a 3-year deal when you're getting a little bit closer to the window where you're going to start contending for wild card spots. which is not going to happen next season with the Sharks.
Nope.
And I think, like, especially if like Celebrinis ends up being the pick, being able to add those two in on 3-year deals in a year's time, and just allowing those two to just romp through the NCAA ranks yet again would be a really nice way to allow them to just get so comfortable with those added puck touches. And we rarely see players that get signed in the NCAA where people end up saying like they should have been brought a year earlier, right? Like having that extra time allows them to round out their game and also focus on a variety of weaknesses, which Boston College is an excellent program to kind of iron out those little faults.
You bring up a good point, especially with the contract situation. Right? We've seen Mike Grier be very shrewd with his contracts and the way he juggles. Like last year, he had William Eklund play 8 games and then send it back to the AHL so that way he can slide that ELC contract one more year. Even though I think most like William Eklund played a really nice season in the AHL. Like he should have, could have played the rest of the season in the NHL. And I think William Eklund's a better player now for spending that time. But I mean, you see right with Mike Grier the way he has built this, kind of torn this thing down to the studs, and he has been very shrewd with that, playing with, making sure he's trying to maximize these contracts. And you assume a guy like Will Smith is probably going to get paid a lot of money after his ELC. So if you can kick that can down at least another road, it does make a lot of sense, and you are still kind of getting that year of development out of him. So I do really understand that. One thing I do want to ask, though, I mean, it's not an on ice thing, but just something to kind of think about. And I know, again, the Sharks are a very small market team, right? But the Sharks, like, attendance has been borderline a problem this year, right? There has been nothing for fans to get excited about. Like, is there maybe, we know Hasso-Plattner is a very kind of hands-off owner, but like adding Will Smith to your team next year and putting him and William Eklund on the covers of the especially a year where you traded Erik Karlsson, traded Tomas Hertl, could inject some life back into this team, and something that at least fans could have something to cheer about, right? Hadi, like that is something that teams do have to think about a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other aspect of that is, talking about the contract situation, I don't think sliding the year for Will Smith and getting an extra year on an ELC is actually good long term, because, by the end of his 3-year ELC, if he signs this summer, let's say he's at 40 points in the NHL in his sophomore year, for example. He's going to be much more manageable if you sign him to a long-term extension at that stage of his career than if you sign him in his junior year, his 3rd year in the NHL. And he's at
like a 60, 70 point. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Player, yeah.
If you sign him at that point, you're going to be playing a lot more per year. So I feel like it would be a good idea to manage that contract in a way that allows you to sign Will Smith to an 8-year manageable, salary deal that would then allow you to have him long term on a manageable salary and build your team around him. It's kind of what we saw with Nathan MacKinnon. He struggled early on in his career and it made his NHL future a bit kind of muddy at the start of his at the start of his 8-year. I think it was $6.5 million contract, and by the end of it, it was by far and away the best contract in the NHL. Right, so there are ways to manage this that allow you to kind of see the bigger picture long term and see what the trajectory of the Sharks are, but also what the trajectory of your prospects is likely to be. So not only do I think it would be a good idea in terms of giving Sharks fans something to be excited about, I think it's a good idea because it gives Sharks fans something to be excited about for the next 10, 15 years as they set up Will Smith for a long-term extension at a manageable salary.
Sebastian, pay the man now or pay him later?
I mean, he's going to get paid no matter what. He's going to make bank, right? And I mean, I totally see the arguments there as well. At the same time, am I overly confident that even if you like sign him immediately, that by the time you're even able to extend him, he's not already a 60-point guy? I don't know, right? Like if you're playing Will Smith as a 21-year-old with William Eklund, with high skill players in that top 6, I think he's going to be very productive, especially with high-end power play minutes, which San Jose will want to give him no matter what. Like that's where he thrives, and he's going to produce. He is so electric with the puck on his stick. He's among the most dynamic, skilled, and patient on-puck players outside outside the NHL today. And I think that he's going to get a pretty big payday nonetheless. Of course, that's probably going to rise up by maybe like $1 million or so if you push it back by a year. But by that point, the salary cap will be increasing, and I don't think that $1 million difference is necessarily going to be the biggest thing in the
We're
world.
still paying Martin Jones that $1 million.
Exactly.
Every penny counts.
Yeah.
All right. Hadi, make your closing argument on why the San Jose Sharks should sign Will Smith to his ELC this summer.
He's ready for pro hockey, and he's going to be getting a lot more games than he would right now, which for conditioning is great, especially if he stays in the same range of ice time that he is right now, the kind of 16 to 18 minutes in the top six, possibly on a second line just to kind of eat things up and then working him up. I think that that's really, really great for his progression in terms of being able to play games, every couple of nights, sometimes 3 games in 3 nights, that kind of stuff. Like, that's a big part of it. And on top of that, I think that he's going to be facing a lot more defensive scenarios in the AHL with San Jose than he would on a top line with Boston College, just a bulldozer of an NCAA team. So it's just, there are a lot of great elements that he can incorporate into his game at an AHL level that he still would at an NCAA level, but for me, to a lesser extent, because he's not facing the same level of competition. And on top of that, like I mentioned, the contract situation, I think that especially if you're a team like San Jose, you want to make money wherever you can. And being able to save on contracts and keep really, really good players for a really, really long amount of time is crucial when you're trying to build this type of team.
Sebastian, your closing argument on why Will Smith should go back to Boston College one more season.
Allow him to just be that superstar for one more year. If you bring him to the AHL immediately, he's probably going to be very, very good, even potentially a star in the AHL, but he's not going to be the type of player that can dictate the pace on every single shift he's on the ice for. And I think that on top of that, being able to give him a full season where he's playing like 21, 22, 23 minutes a night will also facilitate the jump when he does go to the AHL or the NHL and is playing far more games. Whereas if he's making that jump right now, I would have a couple questions of how well he can adapt. That said, there's always alternative strategies there, like the Leo Carlsson strat in Anaheim of playing him some but not all games. But on top of that, I think one more season playing with his best buds, Gabe Perreault and Ryan Leonard, would also be quite helpful. And last but not least, I think that just staying in like one of the best non-NHL environments that you can find in the hockey world today for one more season is just a net positive as a whole, and bring him, obviously the Barracuda is a stronger environment as a whole than San Jose is at the moment, but I think keeping him in that Boston College elite level environment for one more season would be a pretty solid choice. But again, the luxury here is that there's no bad decision. Will Smith is a great player and he's going to thrive wherever he is. And Sharks fans are going to be excited whether he arrives in the fall or if it's pushed back by a full year.
All right, I'll ask you both. What does Mike Grier do? Hadi, what does he do? What do you think he actually does?
I don't think he signs him. Given what we've seen with William Eklund, the willingness to push that ELC further, I think that he goes that route by allowing, Will Smith to further his NCAA career, become, like Sebastian mentioned, that real bona fide first line superstar on Boston College. And then he kind of like sees where it goes from there. I would not be surprised at all if he doesn't sign this summer, but I think it would be great for his game.
Sebastian?
I think this is why me and Hadi make a great team, because I actually do think that he will sign this season. So we're both siding with the opposite arguments here. But I think, again,
you guys just really good.
It goes to show
persuasive.
there's no bad choice here, which is beautiful.
Exactly.
Yeah. You guys are just very persuasive on your arguments on each other. So maybe you just spend too much time together. So thank you guys very much. We'll get in the third segment. I will make my final rendering on here. But before I let you guys go, where can the people find you?
Yeah, you can find us at Locked On NHL Prospects, wherever you're listening to this, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is. Locked On NHL Prospects. We are the source for everything prospects related, especially heading into the draft season, the postseason here. We're going to ramp up the coverage. We've got mock drafts, player profiles, all that good stuff. You can find me at Hadi K _ scouting. And Sebastian?
Hi_Sebastian on Twitter. And for all of our other work, Dobber Prospects, we do a lot of scouting work, and we're going to be getting out with our April rankings, which should be out just before the U18s kickoff soccer. Okay. When the U18s start off. And yeah, so Dobber Prospects is the other place where you can find a lot of our work.
Thanks, boys.
Thanks
so much.
All right, guys, before we finish up, I give my thoughts of what I think the Sharks should do. Just need to take a quick break. All right. We've heard Hadi and Sebastian, and we recorded that on Saturday before Will Smith had his epic game dropping the rooster trick. And one game shouldn't make or break your kind of decision process, right? If Will Smith had a terrible game, right, you shouldn't let one game kind of decide the outcome. I think the Sharks should sign him. I think after this season, the Sharks should sign him. And especially, again, we don't know what Will Smith's thinking, right? You know, he seems to enjoy the college life, et cetera, right? He's with his friends, all that fun stuff. But if Boston College kind of continues to do what they're doing, right? If they win a national championship, as they're going to be the number one seed, if they win the national championship, like what more does he have to prove at college? Maybe if they get close and they lose, I could see that like going back one more time mentality. But I think if they win, I think he signs because I don't think there's anything else for him to prove. Maybe if he wants to go back and try to win the Hobie Baker, and just put up a bajillion points, try to set a bunch of records, all that stuff. I could totally see that. But I think I don't think he's going to get the development he needs at Boston College. And the development he needs, right, is in his own zone. And I think I know Hockey East is good, right? He's going to play good teams night in, night out. He's going to, assuming Cutter Gauthier signs, which we all think Cutter Gauthier is going to sign, he's going to get bumped up in that top line minutes. He's going to play, right? We know he's going to get more of an opportunity next year if he goes to Boston College, but I don't know how much of a bump up it really is, right? We've seen Boston College just dismantle teams, and it's not like Boston College is going to fall off a map next year. Like they're going to have good players coming in. Like this team's going to be good again, and he's going to be a big reason why they would be good again if he decides to go back. But I think for what's best for his development is to take it to the next level and start playing professionally. And whether that's in the AHL or in the NHL, that is for him to kind of see where he's at. And I wouldn't mind him starting in, even if he plays like almost a whole season in the AHL or a good chunk of the season in the AHL, it's probably what's best for him, right? Look at William Eklund. We as Sharks fans were miserable that he's playing the AHL, but guess what? William Eklund's a better player for it. And I think having Will Smith at least start this season in the AHL next year wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. And maybe it's him and Macklin Celebrini who are both, like, if you get lucky, right? Get a little bit lucky. And there's a case for Macklin Celebrini to go back to college. I still think Macklin Celebrini is going to turn pro after he gets drafted. But like, you need to start bringing some energy to the franchise. And this, again, we know how bad this season is, and you shouldn't let decisions like that kind of be the overarching reasons why you do something, but it has to be part of it. And this season has been, just think back to the past couple seasons, right? Sharks have traded away Brent Burns, traded away Timo Meyer. You traded away Erik Karlsson. You traded away Tomas Hertl. Those are 4 huge pillars. And I think having a guy like Will Smith, at least in San Jose, who you can kind of be like, look, our future's coming, guys. It's bright. It's going to be awesome. Will Smith's going to be an amazing player for the Sharks going forward. Having that kind of tangible thing right there, again, not the worst thing in the world. And I think for him, yes, he needs to get stronger. Again, it's not like they don't have weight rooms in San Jose. Like if he's a professional player, guess what? He can spend his whole time working to be a professional player. And I think that learning to go from that grind of playing, 35, 40 games in college to 72 games in the AHL, 82 games in the NHL, that's a big jump. And having him in San Jose, and maybe you kind of do the Leo Carlson thing like that they talked about, where give him some days off here and there, some rest days, et cetera, et cetera. That's a potential. Like, there's plenty of ways to go about it and try to put Will Smith into the best possible position to succeed. But I think if he goes back to school, he's just going to be a big fish in a little pond. And I think I really think he needs to make the jump, not only for his development, but I think for the Sharks' development too, as a franchise, right? Turning the page on the yesteryear and the team, the old players, and start looking forward to the future. And guys like Quentin Musty, Will Smith, William Eklund, Thomas Bordelot, Beasted, like Edstrom, you have these guys who are going to be coming here soon. And, if he's just you could have a potential AHL team with him, Beasted. We'll see with Havlet. I still think he probably stays another year in Sweden. If Edstrom comes over, who knows? Like, we don't know that. Like, there's some potential here for the Sharks. If those guys have good AHL seasons to kind of really get things kind of clicking here pretty soon. So, yeah, I think he does sign. As if they win the national championship, I'm fairly certain he signs. If they come close, we'll see. But I think he's done just about everything he can do at the college level. And I think it's time for him to kind of continue to test himself, especially as a player who we've seen, right? As the games get bigger, he puts on a better and better performance. And I think bringing that winning attitude, like Will Smith has done nothing but win, no matter like where he's at. And the Sharks need that. They need that kind of winning attitude in San Jose again. And he would be such a huge injection of energy and talent into the franchise that desperately needs an injection of energy and talent right now. So I think he signs. I think Mike Grier realizes that Will Smith can only do so much more in college, and need the best way to round out his games, the defensive part of his game, which he still needs to round out, right, is to have him playing against professional men. So that's going to be it for me today. We'll be back tomorrow to discuss the Sharks game against the Dallas Stars. We also have another great draft profile coming later this week. So the only hint I will give is WHL players. So make sure you guys are following along for that. So you guys can follow along wherever you get podcasts and watch on YouTube as well. You can find the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. You can find me on Twitter at MyFryhole. Till tomorrow. Bye, friends.